morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to look at what can accurately be called the best Pokemon deck in Japan right now. Now, over this weekend, they had what has often been referred to as an unofficial nationals over in Japan. It was not a proper national championships. It had somewhere in the region of 200 players, including a lot of very, very high-level players, and that's still a big tournament. So I think we can rightly call this the best deck in Japan, which means that when Darkness Ablaze comes out, very good chance it will be the best deck over here, and it's Vikavolt. We all got so caught up getting excited about Eternatus V Max and how that looks like the best deck coming around that we all kind of forgot how nuts Vikavolt V is. Which we shouldn't have done, because Vikavolt V is basically the new Seismitoad, and Seismitoad ruled the game for pretty much the entire time it was legal. Now, Vikavolt V, the best thing about it, the real selling point, is the attack, that for just 2 energy, does 50 damage and prevents your opponent using item cards during their next turn. It's item lock. It is a full-on, unabashed, unashamed item lock deck. And the goal, the vast majority of the game, is going to be to item lock your opponent and just sit there hitting for 50 damage, knowing that your opponent cannot play items, has no answer to what you're doing, and will lose the game. Now, the good news is there is actually a second attack on Vikavolt, which is extremely useful. 3 energy, and it does 190, discarding 2 energy attached to this Pokemon. So essentially, when you need that big KO, you attach a 3rd energy, get the big KO, go down to 1 energy, reattach a 2nd the next turn, and keep the item lock going. You will give your opponent a turn without item lock, which you need to be careful about, but also you can get a big KO when you need it. And make no mistake about it, this is an item lock Vikavolt deck. That is what the deck is for, that is what the deck is about. There are a bunch of other Pokemon here, but to be clear, it is very much a Vikavolt deck. Now, in terms of attackers, we basically just have 1 copy of Raichu and Alolan Raichu. And this comes in for 3 energy, it does 80 damage, but if you became active this turn, you do 160 plus paralysis. So essentially, if you need a really big KO on a VMAX or something like that, you bring this in, hit 160 plus paralysis, with the theory that if your opponent doesn't have a switch, next turn you will get the KO. Of course, when you use this, you turn off item lock, so that does open up switch if they need it. It does also have a GX attack, bearing in mind there is no other GX attack you need to use in this deck. That for 3 energy does 150, and if you've got 5 energy on there, then you get to do 250 and switch to the bench. It's just the biggest attack you've got in the deck. Simple as that. It's alright. Most of the time you want to be using Vikavolt. This is for when the Vikavolt breaks down, your opponent has big Pokemon that can KO, etc. And then you just got a bunch of support Pokemon. 3 copies of Jirachi for the amazing ability that lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, find a trainer card, put it in your hand, and then you go to sleep and free retreat with a skateboard, which you obviously play. A copy of Absol to increase your opponent's active basic Pokemon's retreat cost by 1. There's a lot of basic Pokemon around at the moment, and you're keeping them in the active. They can't use something like Switch because they're item locked. Which means if they want to get out the active, their only choice is going to be retreating, so you play Absol to make it very difficult for them to retreat. We got a copy of Tapu Koko Prism Star, and this is just there to accelerate energy. It lets you attach 1 energy to each of 2 bench Pokemon. It accelerates energy, it's good. Bearing in mind that Vikavolt's a 2 energy attack, and you want to get it going turn 1, so you get the item lock. I mean, if you go second, you literally get the item lock from your first turn, and your opponent has had a turn, but remember turn 1, there's no attacking or supporters, so if you get the item lock that quickly, it's kind of hilarious for you, not for your opponent. We got a copy of Marshadow, which is basically there to get rid of stadium cards. A copy of Oricorio. If you have a Pokemon KO'd, you get to draw 3 cards. good for consistency, and a copy of Dedenne that lets you discard your hand and draw 7 cards. Again, it's good for consistency, but one of the things we need to point out about Vikavolt is you need to get going early. Giving your opponent even a couple of turns with item cards could be the difference between them setting up and winning and them not. It's pretty gosh darned important. Now, in terms of energy, yes, we play Lightning Energy because you're a Lightning deck and also you got stuff like Tapu Koko. But you're a Lightning deck, so you're playing 4-speed energy. It's a Lightning Energy, but when you attach it to a Lightning Pokemon, you draw 2 cards. Really is a no-brainer. But we also see a couple of copies of Capture Energy here. When you attach it to a Pokemon, you get to search for a basic Pokemon and put it on the bench. So you attach it to Vikavolt and you can get a Jirachi or something along those lines, or even a Tapu Koko. Remember, Jirachi's attack is 1 lightning, 1 colorless, so you can attach Capture Energy, search Tapu Koko, use that to accelerate the lightning energy, and then get the lock nice and quickly. Now, in terms of trainer cards here, there are a couple things which are slightly unusual, but nothing too huge. We do see a copy of Counter Gain here. If you are behind on prizes, it reduces your attack cost by 1, turns Vikavolt into a single energy attack. Again, the fact that it's lightning colorless rather than 2 lightning is actually huge. And we do see a couple copies of Giant Bomb. Now, Giant Bomb here is awesome, because Giant Bomb, if you would take 180 or more damage, you put 10 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So, combine that with the 50 you've done when you hit them, and remember that we've got Electro Power still. You do 30 damage more for your lightning attacks this turn. And all of a sudden, if your opponent can get a KO, there is then an excellent chance that you'll get a KO right back. So essentially you've traded KOs, but they're still item locked, so ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. We do see a copy of Champion's Mantle here. That is the new tool card that gives an extra 50 HP to a basic Pokemon, which is pretty redonkulous. Toughness Mantle, sorry. My apologies. I say Champion's Mantle because it's clearly Leon the Champion's Cape, but Antoine did translate it as Toughness Mantle, and I should mention we are using Antoine Boulet's translations here because, you know, lovely dude. So that gives you an extra 50 HP, turns Vikavolt into a 260 HP Pokemon. That's quite nice. And then we actually do see a full 3 copies of Guzma and Hala. Now, Guzma and Hala searches out a Stadium, a Special Energy, and a tool. But we see there are a couple of useful tools like a Skateboard, Giant Bomb, Toughness Mantle, Counter Gain. Quite a lot of tools, actually. Then, of course, you got your Speed Energy, which lets you draw 2 cards when you attach it, and your Capture Energy. And in terms of Stadium, you got Thunder Mountain. And Thunder Mountain is huge. Thunder Mountain reduces your attack cost by 1, so it turns your item lock attack into a single colorless energy. And between Tapu Koko and Thunder Mountain, you only need one of them. You should be able, if you go second, to get the turn 1 item lock and pretty much keep it and carry it through the entire game, which is kind of awesome. Now, in terms of other supporter cards, we see 3 copies of Marnie. Both players shuffle a hand into their deck. You get 5 cards, your opponent gets 4. Really nice if you can do this turn 1 and then combine it with item lock. But also just silly things like if you see your opponent play an Evolution Incense turn 1 because they're worried about being item locked, you can just put that Evolution Pokemon back into their deck, which is kind of funny. We don't see any copies of Professor's Research because there's just too many things here you don't want to discard, and the little bit of disruption with Marnie is pretty big. We do see 3 copies of Boss's Orders to grab a Pokemon in the active, bearing in mind a lot of the time you'll be item locking, so you can drag up a Pokemon that gives up multiple prizes but isn't going to attack, and then 2 or 3 hit KO it, while your opponent is just not able to get it out the active. We see a copy of Cynthia and Caitlin, draw 3 cards, get a supporter back from the discard. That seems pretty good. A copy of Erica's Hospitality, draw 1 card for each Pokemon your opponent has in play, as long as you've got 4 or fewer other cards in your hand. And then 1 copy of Bird Keeper. Now, Bird Keeper is the new one we've seen that a lot of people think is going to be a staple. I think we're going to see it a lot as a one-off, and that does seem to be, and it is very early doors, but it does seem to be holding for the moment. That is the one that just lets you switch while drawing free cards. Also very important in a format with Vikavolt running around, blocking item cards. Elsewhere, we see 4 copies of Quick Ball, because you've got an entirely basic deck, and that searches out basic Pokemon. 3 copies of Tag Call. You've got your Raichu and Alolan Raichu, you've got your Cynthia and Caitlyn, but this also lets you grab your Guzma and Hala. 4 copies of the aforementioned Electro Power for doing extra damage. 2 copies of Reset Stamp. Your opponent shuffles a hand into their deck and draws a number of cards equal to their remaining prizes. And again, you're an item lock deck. So you put them down to 2 cards in the hand and then item lock them. And it really, really limits their choices. A late game Reset Stamp plus a KO on their only attacker and then into item lock is going to finish a lot of games, even if you were losing for a large part of the game. And then we just got 4 copies of Switch. You need to get in and out the active. You need to make sure that you can, as fast as possible, get that Vikavolt in the active. But you need to remember, a lot of the time, you're going to need it on the bench, so you can accelerate an energy using Tapu Koko. That's where Switch comes in absolutely huge here. I should mention that this did win the big tournament in Japan, but the second place deck was a mirror match. The same deck. So when 2 of these end up getting top 2, that's something you probably need to start paying attention to. Make no mistake about it, Vikavolt is awesome, and it very much looks like Vikavolt is here to stay as the best deck in the format. But I'd like to know what you think. I'd like to know if you're buying it. I'd like to know if you believe it. I'd like to know if you think it's going to be this good or whether you think it's just a little bit of hype. Let me know in the comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.